Hello friends, a guten Moed. Some words of inspiration and chizuk brought to you by the wonderful people at Kosherica. Let me share a story with you. The Dubna Magid uses this story to bring out a beautiful point. And the story goes as follows. This wonderful gentleman who is very successful in business, makes a lot of money, but he can't settle down and find a kala to marry. And years go by, and he's realizing that maybe he missed the boat, and he's sitting one night in an inn, in a kretschme, and he's having a drink, and he's sad. And the bartender notices him sitting in a corner, with a long face, and he says to him, "Excuse me, my dear Yid, can I help you? What's the problem? Why are you so sad?" And he tells him, "I'm getting older in years, haven't found a kala, I just can't settle down, I don't know what's going to be with me." And the fellow says, "You know what? There's a waitress here who works here at the inn. She's a wonderful young lady. Maybe you want to meet her." He says, "Fine, set it up." He sets up the meeting. They like each other. They get engaged. And on the wedding day, they're all busy getting prepared. The big simcha in shtetl, her wedding. And the chasna comes running into the kitchen to make sure everything is fine. And he sees the cakes being baked. And he says, "Fellow, come on, hurry up, guys. Hurry up. I want to go to the chuppah already. Put on the fire higher." And he turns on the fire under the cake. Big fire. On his way out, he notices on a hook his kala's apron that she worked in for 40 years in this inn, a well-worn apron. And he goes over to it, pulls out a little scissor from his pocket, and he cuts off a little piece of the apron and puts it into his pocket. A little while later, the kala comes into the kitchen to make sure everything is going well, and she notices the cakes all burnt, all the burnt cakes. Takes a little knife, and she cuts off a little piece of one of the burnt cakes and puts it into her pocket. And the wedding was a beautiful simcha, and they lived happily ever after. 8 months after the wedding, Erev Yom Tov, Erev Pesach, the kala says to her husband, "You know, my dear, I noticed that all my friends got Yom Tov presents. Some got new dresses, some got new jewelry. You haven't gotten me anything." And he gets her something. Then another Yom Tov comes, and she says, "You know, I noticed my friends got some presents, some dresses, some jewelry. You haven't gotten me anything." And then finally he says, "You know what? I realize that it's all about my money, isn't it? It's all about my money." And he pulls out the little piece of the apron, and he says, "My dear kala, don't complain. You have no reason to complain. Remember where you were? Remember this apron where you worked in the inn as a waitress all those years, making nothing, and what a life you had? Now look where you are." And she says, "My dear husband, you're absolutely right, but don't forget." And she pulls out the little burnt piece of cake and says to him, "Don't you forget what a rush you were in, how you couldn't wait to marry me." And the Dubna Magid says, and this is the story of the Eibishter, the Chassan, and Klal Yisrael, the Kala. After Yetzias Mitzrayim, the Yidden say to Hashem, "Okay, beautiful. Now it's time. You got to bench us with all your brachas. You got to give us this, and you got to give us that. And we want this, and we want that." And the Chassan says, "My dear Kala, remember you were avodim b'Mitzrayim. What did you have there? Gornish mit gornished. And now look where you are. Free, freedom. Don't complain." And the Yid, the Kala, takes out a piece of matzah and says, "Yes, dear Chassan, you're right. But don't forget who was in such a rush. You couldn't wait to marry us, that we didn't have time to bake a piece of bread. And we followed you into the desert. And 49 days later, that's all, 49 days later, we were engaged to you at Har Sinai. And here we are, Rabbi Say, almost 2,000 years later, waiting for the real marriage to take place. The Nesuyin, not just the Kiddushin, but the Nesuyin of the Chassan, the Eibishter, and Klal Yisrael, the Kala, as we await Mashiach, and we await the consummation of the marriage between the Chassan and the Kala, Hashem Yisbarech and Klal Yisrael. May we be Zoicha very soon to see that speedily in our days. Another beautiful story I heard about the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson, who was conducting his Seder in 770 on Eastern Parkway. And one of the guests there at the Seder was not so familiar with the Minhagei Chabad, the Chabad customs, that we don't dip anything into the soup, anything wet. We don't dip the matzah into anything wet. And he was dipping the matzah into some borscht. And there was a big commotion. So the Rebbe asked the chassid sitting next to him, what's all this commotion? What's going on? And the chassid said, this guest didn't realize our minhag, and he's dipping the matzah in the borscht. So the chassidim around him are going cuckoo. They're going off the handle. Oh, he's dipping the matzah into the borscht. So Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak turned to the chassidim and said, it is far much better, I prefer, that I see a red matzah and not to see a red face of a yid being embarrassed, chas v'sholem. You have to know your priorities. Better a red matzah than a red face embarrassing a yid. And during this time, we're going through this difficult time, we need to speak about only the good things about Klal Yisrael. Only to find the good. Like when we searched for the chametz, remember that story? The question was asked, why do we also burn the candle along with all the chametz? The feather and the spoon touch the chametz, so that deserves to be burnt. But why do we burn the candle? And one of the tzaddikim once answered, because a candle that agrees to be part of a team that's looking for chametz by a yid deserves to be burnt. By a yid, we need to find and look only for good things. And we remind our chassan in Shamayim, Mi ka'amcha Yisrael. Dear Hashem, you couldn't wait to marry us. You took us out of Mitzrayim in such a rush. So it's time to go to the chuppah. And now that all the shuls are closed, unfortunately, so perhaps we can say that Hashem is now homeless. He has no home. But what does Klal Yisrael do? We take him into our homes. We welcome Hashem into our homes. And I think he feels very, very comfortable to be in a Yiddish home. And as the word goes, that Hashem was posach, Hashem jumped over the houses of the Jewish houses when he saw the mezuzah and the blood. And someone said, not only did he jump, he was dancing. This is a Yiddish house. So Hashem, we wait to dance with you at our chuppah, at the wedding with Mashiach Tzidkenu speedily in our days. And please send Klal Yisrael or Yeshua and a Nechama, and may we experience Shvi Shel Pesach, the great miracle of Kriyas Yamsov in our own days, when Hashem will split the 7 seas, as our Navi says in the Nevuah, and he will lead us out of Golus, and we will sing with Mashiach a song that will never end, and a dance that will never end. Have a good Yom Tov.